name is Eglo, and today I thought we would talk a little bit about books. Now, I have a 10-year-old who is starting to read. She's been reading a while, but she's starting to trying to find her interest, and we've been helping her, trying to find that book that drags you in, you know. And so I've been reconnecting with that for myself. Trying to remember what book was it that really caught me. Now, unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the first book that I really fell in love with. It was in Icelandic, but I believe it may have been a translation. It was situated in Scotland, if I remember right, and it was about this boy who, along with a few friends, went to a castle where he spent the night, and it was haunted. A simple ghost story. It was very exciting and it really hooked me. And I can't remember the name of it. I don't remember the author. I have been trying to find it because it's interesting, but I haven't had any luck with that. Now, the first books that really hooked me was by a Norwegian superstar, an author named Margit Sandemo. She wrote this family story, historical novel, romance, magic, horror, and these are 47 books. This is the first one. It's in Icelandic. It's my original. I have them all with me here in Sweden. One of the very few things I took with me, and these stories, they're short, and there's usually a female lead character. Not always the one born in the family, but she gets married to the family member. It's focus is on the same family throughout generations, and then there's this evil ancestor who makes their life miserable, and he's immortal. Right. And recently, well, a few years ago, they made these into audiobooks on Storytel, where I've been listening to my other audiobooks, and revisited them all in Swedish, which was really interesting because now I know the places that are being talked about, and it became a different focus, and different stories were more impressive now. And no, the book that really caught me off guard and made me want to write even more than I did previously. It's the book that gives me this great writer's envy, and that's Stephen King's Dark Tower series. This is The Gunslinger, and that's what I started with. That's what I got hooked on. I believe I was 19 years old when I read the first book. And I was in Sweden when I read, well, the last book came out, and I read it right away. It was a long road that I kind of took along the way, and this book, being something very different from what I would expect from a book, kind of opened my eyes, and I realized you can actually do whatever you like in a book. If you write, it's your story, and that's the limit is your imagination. And this book really showed me that and taught me that. And it's maybe a little strange book to be telling it, but the combination of this Western sensation along with fantasy elements and maybe a hint of science fiction. There are no rules, or if there are rules, you're supposed to break them. It just makes things more interesting. I love this series. It's been a long time since I read it. I need to reread it. One of my absolute favorite characters is Susanna. I think her dynamic and her entire development throughout the books is just amazing. And when I heard they were making a movie from the books, I became seriously concerned and vowed never to see it. I did see it. It didn't ruin the books for me. It did very little at all. But I was initially very sad to realize that they would probably be cutting out that character, because she is really outstanding. I also this feeling came again years later when I read the last book, because finishing a book like that has to be very hard, and I was worried that I wouldn't like the ending. It's what we all worry with a series like that you're invested in it. You want it to be, you want it to end the way you imagined, or in some way that resonates with you. And I was worried that it wouldn't be right for me or something. And then and I'm not going to spoil it. You're going to have to go read it. But the ending, it's the best ending ever. I don't think I've ever been so happy finishing a book in my life like I was with the last Dark Tower book. And the fourth book, well, if we count the book that I don't know the name of, that I'm going to mention is Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. This is science fiction, and this book, I read it later, after many years after The Gunslinger, and I got this, oh, you can do whatever you want when you're writing. It kind of blew my mind a little, and there's something about Murakami's way of writing that makes me I want to read. I read everything he puts out. He's very good with words. He has a very easy way of talking about serious things and everyday things and mixing them together to be realistic and extraordinary, sometimes at the same time. And this book, I'm very much impressed with the double nature of it, the other world, and then what I at least feel is this world, so to speak. And this made me go into. I read this when I started studying literature in the university, and it was one of the books we were supposed to read a little bit of, if I remember correctly. And after that, I read everything he's written, and he's one of these writers that expands my mind constantly, not just with how he phrases things, but with the ideas. And I love going down his wells and spending time with his characters, whether they are extraordinary or very, very usual. His main characters are often very, very ordinary. Now, what would this list be without at least one proper horror book being on it? Well, The Gunslinger it's marginally horror, let's face it. It's genre. I can't even pronounce the word. I have serious difficulties with the idea of genres, and I mix them. I love horror, but there are a lot of writers that like Murakami, who I think writes horror, even though he's never been labeled a horror writer, and Stephen King, he writes a lot of other things than, it's not just horror. So it's for me, it's a complicated, I have a complicated relationship with this. But the last book is horror, and I can't make a list like this without mentioning it, and that's I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, which completely blew my mind when I read it, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. It's a post-apocalyptic novel. It's a vampire story, and I love vampire stories. I mean, if I had just made this list slightly different, I would have definitely put Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire on this list. I read all her books a little bit, somewhere between San Demo and Stephen King, and I love vampires. There's something about vampires, right? Even those that clearer, they're complicated, and let's not get into that discussion. I like vampires, and this is a vampire story, and this is a vampire story that has a lot of similarities to a zombie story. The vampires are these horrifying monsters, and you have a sole survivor with a dog. And the ending, if it weren't for the ending, I don't think I'd have remembered it as well. It was very readable and a wonderfully well done story, but the ending is completely mind-blowing for me. And how they did not make the movie that way, it's completely beyond me. I love that story because the protagonist, he becomes this while you're always identifying with him, this is the man going through the world, and he's the only one left amongst all these monsters. And in the end, when he identifies that it's the monsters that are normal now, and he's the one that's different, that did something to my mind. And this is why we read, this is why I read, for stories like that. That's hard to do, and really, really hard to do, and really fantastic when you read a book like that just explodes in your head. And this is a different thing for each person, which is why we've been trying to find reading material for my kid. She likes comics a little, and she likes a little of different things, and she likes the idea of horror, but she's a little scared, so she's not yet going into grown up. She reads a little scary books for children and things like that, but I'm not sure horror is her thing. I think maybe she is doing it because I like it, so we'll see where that goes. It's an interesting thing to interesting road to go with her on a trip, kind of, and see how she responds to different text we read together. It's a lot of fun, and it's made me think a lot about the stories that came alive in me, and why I responded to them, and things like that. And it's an interesting thing, and I could probably make this a lot longer. Since I was mentioning Interview with a Vampire, the scene, it wasn't in the first book, it is in one of the second or the third, I can't remember, where Lestat is speaking about his creator, his vampire creator, Magnus, and he describes this awful scene where he's dumped in a pile of bodies, and that's one of these awful scenarios that came alive in my head, and if you can write that well, you're really good. I figured, and I wanted to recreate not that, but something. Anyway, 5 books that made me want to become a writer. Tell me your story. What book started you off reading? Why did you love it? I love these things. I could sit here and talk about books all day. This was my list of books that made me want to become a writer. If you liked the video, subscribe and follow and all that. Find me on social media. I'm active on most of the Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. Connect with me. Tell me what book you started off with when you started reading. Toodaloo!